Have you had to do a lot of bulk sewing in recent times? Okay, so I've got this video here to share with you some of my best tips and tricks for sewing faster whenever you have to batch sew or bulk sew any items that you want to donate to your local community. Okay, so in order to create my masks, I started off with a very large piece of cotton fabric, really tightly woven cotton fabric, and started off by pressing it. I had to give it a very good steam press to get rid of any kinks or creases or anything like that, and before I went ahead to fold it. I had to fold it all the way down to an extent that my pair of scissors or my rotary cutters could cope with, and I also did that to ensure that I saved fabric and I didn't have any wastage. So if you have a look at mine, you can see that I switched between rotary cutter and scissors. So, because I was just testing to see which was better, but I found that the pair of scissors were much better. But if you want to use rotary cutters for yours, make sure that you're using a new blade for your rotary cutters. So here's a tip that I have for you, and I think this really does save time, and it really did help me be more efficient and more productive creating these masks and the others that I've got to go. Always make sure you have spare bobbins, like full bobbins in the right color that you need, so you don't get out of sync with your system of sewing. So when it came up to sewing the seams, any seams that were matched from end to end, I just fed through the sewing machine after one another, and it was really easy. All I did was I raised the machine foot just slightly above, just a little bit, and I fed the next fabric through. And after doing that, I just cut through all of the threads. So the best thing to do here is focus on one seam at a time, and when you finish, you move on to the other. So when it came to sewing up the top parts of the mask, all I did was I just attached one pin at the seam here and another pin at the other seam, just to make sure they matched. The rest I didn't have to pin together. So when it came up to these seams, I didn't bother feeding them through the way I fed them the first time, because you do have the lining and the main fabric. So the reason I like this pattern is that you do not have to use two different fabrics to differentiate between the main fabric and the lining, because the way this pattern is designed, you can tell which is the front and the back, because the back has the folded part and the front doesn't. But it makes sense to check the sewing pattern that you're going to be using. If your sewing pattern doesn't have something to show the front and the back, please use two different fabrics to differentiate between the front and the back of the fabric. So when you're done with this part, the next thing to do is to give it a good press. So you need to turn the fabric right side out, and you also need to give it a very good press. I didn't bother snipping through the seam, the curved seam. All I did was I gave it a very good steam press, and it just formed. The mask formed nicely, so I didn't really have to worry about snipping because I was batch sewing. Whilst you're sewing, it's good to trim as you go, but it's the idea of batch sewing is that you do each section at the same time to reduce the amount of time spent between going from one thing to the other and checking this and checking the other. So when it got to the elastics, I didn't have enough. I ran out of white elastics. I've made lots of them. I've used white elastics for lots of masks that I made before that I sent off. Then I had to switch between white and black. But you know, they're still the same size. The Mimi G pattern, she recommends the use of a 1/4 inch wide elastic, and she recommends the use of a 22-inch long elastic. But then here's my tip: if you do not have elastic, you can go ahead and use bias tape, ribbon, strings, or you could just create yours by sewing a long strip and then turning it inside out and feed it through. Then you can then make that a bit longer than 22 inches, which can then be tied by the frontline stuff. A tip that I have for you when you do your zigzagging is to pin. You need to pin because they're quite fiddly, these elastics, at 1/4 inch elastics. Pin and then feed it through your machine. When you get it in there, then you can take the pin out and then start zigzagging. I found them really, really fiddly to get started. So the next thing to do now is to click on this video here on the screen. It would show you how to create face mask adapters or ear savers for all our frontline staff who have to wear those elasticated face masks that do cause a lot of strain on the ears. And I have more videos on sewing tips and tricks here for you to watch, and I look forward to seeing you in those videos. All the very best. Bye!